This is the Denon DJ LC6000 Prime. It is a deck controller. It is designed to function with Denon DJ's own Prime gear, but also it works with other software to give you an extra deck that gives you physical control of something that you haven't got in any other way. These types of controllers used to be around. There were a couple a few years ago, but they don't really exist out there at all. This is the only one I can think of that's out there now. So in this review, we're going to look at it. I'm going to plug it into the Prime gear. We're also going to look at it with another piece of software. I'll explain what other software it works with. By the end of it, you'll be really sure whether this is something that you want to add to your system or not. Now, as ever, if you find this useful, do the right thing, click subscribe, click the bell. It lets us tell you when we add more videos just like this. Right. Now, before we plug this in and look at it, I want to show you the problem that this unit solves. And I'm going to show you that by looking at a Denon DJ setup. We've got two of the Denon DJ media players here. This is the SC6000M and this is the SC6000. So let's get some music playing on the first one. And on the second one over here, I'm going to get some music playing as well. One deck. And the other deck. One music source, two music sources, two channels on your mixer. Now, so far so good, but Denon DJ's system has got something other media players don't have. Each of these can actually play two sources of music. They've actually got two sets of RCA audio outputs on the back, and you can plug them into two channels of the mixer. So for instance, over here on this side, I've got another track loaded up on the other layer. They're called layers. I press the button here and it'll switch from the waveform that we can see here to another waveform that's just sat there waiting for me to do something. So let's get a track playing on the other waveform and mix it in. That's synced up there. You can see we've now got two pieces of music playing from the same player. I've still got the third piece of music over here. And I've got these two as well. And if I want to control these two, I have to switch the layer here by pressing this button. Now I'm controlling one. And now I'm controlling the other. Now, that's awesome. The fact you can have two pieces of music playing on one player is fantastic. The money you save is awesome because you've got four players effectively, but just two physical players. If you've ever used a DJ controller with four channels or four decks, you know, this is nothing new, but it's definitely new to media players. But there is an issue, and as I say, if you've ever used a 4-channel controller that's only got two platters, which of course they all have, you'll know what I'm talking about. It can be quite confusing having this layer button, having two sets of controls for the same, or one set of controls for two pieces of music. It can be confusing. There's different workarounds so that, for instance, when you're moving the pitch faders, they don't kick in until you move them to a certain place and all that. I could go into it in more detail, but just trust me, it's confusing. And that is where these come in, because this secondary player can be the physical controls that you're missing from this player for the second layer or for the second piece of music. So let's figure this out then together. I'm going to plug in the USB to this player here. This player here has got very little going on the back of it, by the way. Let's just get that plugged in there. I'll show you what it's got around the back of it. It has got the USB that I just plugged in. It's got an on-off switch, and it's got a power input, just in case the power from the USB isn't enough. I haven't found that to be the case at all so far in testing it. No audio, because the audio is all going on the other player. This is literally just a secondary player to give you control over that piece of audio. So I'm going to put this down now here, right next to the first player. Now, this is all lit up and looking nice, but have a look at the waveform on the screen. We now have two waveforms going on here. And the reason we have two waveforms going on here is that we've got that full extra physical control over the unit. So hit play on this one. And I'm now controlling that second waveform on our screen. Here. And on this deck here is the first waveform. So it's given me full physical control over that second deck, which I didn't have before because I had to press the layer button to get that. So that's how it works. And I'm going to unplug it now and just hold it up again to show you the controls on this. The controls on this are exactly the same as the controls on the Denon DJ Prime. So this has got 8.5-inch platter, 8 performance pads with all the modes, play and pause, beat jump, track skip, the auto manual looping, pitch, and all this stuff here. The jog wheel tension, so you can have the jog wheel really quite tense or really quite loose. And only a couple of tiny differences. It's got a needle drop here for moving, navigating through the track, and it's also lacking the knob which decides how quickly or slowly the deck stops when you hit the stop button here, because that's controlled for both music sources on the player from the equivalent button on the main player. But apart from that, its controls are absolutely identical to the controls that you find over on the player, which is a secondary player too. And you could buy one of those to plug in, as I've just done there on that one unit, to give me, I've now got 3 decks, so it's great for an a cappella or loops or whatever. And if you really wanted, you could put a 4th one on the other end. You could go all James Hype and start using a whole set of 4 decks. And of course, the advantage of this is it's so much cheaper than buying extra media players, because the media players aren't cheap. So you don't need that extra media player, not with this system, because you've already got the 2 deck, you know, the computer to control 2 decks in there. You don't need to buy another one of those. So for far less money, you can buy an LC6000 Prime and unlock the extra decks, give you that physical control over the extra decks that you're missing with the way it's set up when you've just got one player with 2 music sources in it. Right, so that's how it works in the Denon DJ gear. Let's have a little look at it though in a slightly more adventurous setup, which might set a few, set a few light bulbs going off in your head as to how versatile this is. Let's have a look at it with Serato. So here I have the DDJ1000 SRT Serato controller, and I've got next to it our trusty LC6000. So in this instance, we're not going to plug this anywhere near the actual controller itself. Instead, we're going to take our USB from the back of the Denon unit and we're just going to plug it into our computer, because Serato is now going to see this and just treat it as a secondary controller alongside the main controller that we already have here. So what happens now is we get these flashing 4 lights here, and what these are asking us to do is decide which of Serato's 4 decks we want to control. So because I've got this next to this deck here, I'd probably want it to control deck 4, so I'll press the 4th button there, and then the whole thing springs into life, and now we have control over our 4th deck in Serato. So the Serato software is on the screen now, and I'll turn the jog wheel on the unit here, and you can see on the Serato software I'm controlling that bottom deck there. So we now have control not only over the first 2 decks here, deck 1 in Serato and deck 2, but I've got deck 3 over here as well that I'm controlling from this unit here. So let's have a little look at some of the things that it does with the Serato implementation. So in the middle of the deck here, we just get the word Serato and how far how the track is moving. We don't get any other information there, but that's okay. It's better than nothing. We'll set a little loop going there. In fact, I'm just going to move that loop back a little bit. I'll use the needle skip just to get to somewhere where it's not flashing to tell me I'm near the end of the track. So a little loop is playing away there, and I can do all the usual adjusting of it here. But also I've got the same controls down here. So for instance, loop is this one. And that's doing in Serato exactly the same thing that you see when you're using the controls on the 1000 SRT. But this instance we're controlling it from here. Press it again, I get my loop roll, my manual loop rather. Press the next button, I get my loop roll. My hot cues are here as well. And you can do exactly the same with these as you can on any Serato controller. You can press shift to get rid of them. And if I hold down, I've got a slicer as well. If I hold down shift and press any of these buttons here, I go into my pitch play mode. So let's just skip back to the beginning of that track there and have a look at pitch play mode. So pitch play mode will take the pitch up or down. You hear the pitch going down there and going up there, and you can see that on the screen as well. On the right hand side on deck 4 you can see the -1, +1, +2, +3 and so on. And use the parameter buttons as well to move the parameter around there, so I can do more pitch changes. But basically what you got here is pretty much all the control you need over Serato simply by just plugging it in there. This also works in exactly the same way on Virtual DJ, and it also works in exactly the same way on Algorithms DJ Pro. And indeed, you could plug the second one in as well and have all 4 decks playing. All you would need would be enough USB sockets on your computer. If you haven't got them, a little powered USB hub to get everything plugged in there. And so you could turn any Serato controller, as long as it unlocks the 4-deck version of Serato, into a controller with 3 or 4 physical decks, just by adding a couple of these to it, which is pretty awesome. And another use would be if you've got the money to buy just one Denon DJ player, and you know that you're going to want 2 in the end, but you can't really afford it, and you also know you're going to want more than 2 decks at some point, you could buy one of the secondary LC6000s and have your mixer with an LC6000 on one side and your main media player on the other side, and then you've got 2 decks. You've got the ability to mix with 2 channels and to DJ as most DJs do, but you've only actually bought 1 media player, and you've just bought a secondary player to go alongside it, and then in the future you can add another media player and maybe another secondary player to give yourself 4 full decks. So it's a really versatile unit. It can be added to controllers for Serato, for Algorithms DJ, for Virtual DJ. Like to see it coming on Tractor though. I think it's great. I can't believe someone hasn't done this before. They actually have. Denon DJ did it years ago with a kind of like mini player, and other manufacturers have had something similar since, but not many of them. But this is definitely going to be something that I think is going to fill a big gap in the market. I think we'll see a lot of people buying it who are not only Denon DJ users. And it does bring into focus how expensive it is if you are a Pioneer DJ user and you want to have 3 or 4 decks, because you have to buy 3 or 4 of the big Pioneer players, which cost an awful lot of money, in order to get anywhere like the same functionality you could get with the Denon DJ gear. So that's the Denon DJ LC6000 review. We've written this up in a lot more detail over on the website, so there's a link underneath for that if you'd like to go and read the written version of the review. I'd love to know what you think about the little LC6000. Is this something that you'll be buying for your system? Do you like what you've seen? Do you think it's cool that it works with Serato and Algorithm Software and with Virtual DJ, as well as with Denon DJ's own stuff? Or are you scratching your head thinking, why did they bother doing that? Let us know in the comments underneath. I'd love to hear what you've got to say about this. And as I said at the beginning, if you found this useful and you want to be told when we do more stuff like this, then subscribe to the channel and click the bell so we can notify you when we go live again with another review. Meanwhile, from me, Phil at Digital DJ Tips, get good, get out there, make the moments. I'll see you again very soon.